The first officer stepped onto my porch like he'd done it 1,000 times, ready to talk about mailbox regulations and community standards. Then he looked at my wife and froze so hard the wind seemed to stop. His voice cracked, and he straightened up all at once. "Commander Reed." Ma'am and our HOA president's smile, the nice church lady one she wore at bake sales, just cracked right down the middle. Yeah, that happened. "My name's Ethan Cole. I teach American history, which means I can smell a staged rebellion before the posters go up. We moved to Pine Hollow Ridge for quiet. 52 houses, carbon copy lawns, dog walkers who wave with the same hand every morning. And my wife Morgan kept her job private because the second folks hear you're a cop, every small talk turns into, "About that ticket. Or can you check this thing for me?" We liked being anonymous, arguing about whether the hydrangeas were drowning, taking the dog out at sunset and talking about nothing, just being people. The fine showed up on a Tuesday, like a summons glossy letterhead. 3 angles of our mailbox citations I'd never heard of. $450 for being 1.5 inches too tall. Morgan's practical. Pick your battles, babe, pay it, and move on. But something in me itched. Teacher radar, the kind you get when a kid's technically true excuse still doesn't add up. So I borrowed Benji's tape measure and walked our block in a hoodie, like a creep. 14 mailboxes, 7 taller than ours, 3 shorter by a hair, 4 the same, and only we got tagged. So either our HOA president, Paige Whitmore, was terrible at her job, or someone had circled our address in red. 2 days later, Benji's fixing our gate and says it like weather. Paige asked me to flag property issues while I'm out. So people aren't surprised by Fine's friendly tone, helpful vibe. But in my head, something clicked. That's not neighborly. That's intelligence gathering dressed up as courtesy. And once you see it that way, you can't unsee it. Friday. I dropped my keys behind Morgan's plant arrangement by the front window. Reached back, felt metal. Pulled out a coin-sized device with a tiny lens and serious mounting hardware. Not a toy. Not something you buy with a gift card. I ran the model, and my stomach went cold. 30 microcam. Law enforcement. And licensed investigator only. And when Morgan got home, I held it up and watched her shift into that calm part of herself. I call Commander. She placed it on a dish towel, like evidence, and asked the question that bent the air in the room, Ethan. Who here knows what I do? You know what I mean, how many? Next morning, an emergency HOA meeting lands on our phones. Community safety concerns, 7 p.m. Recreation hall by the pool. We walk in expecting 10 bored people and find the room packed like a tournament. Paige at the front with a clipboard, the whole thing blocked like a play. Cindy stands and worries about surveillance. Another neighbor talks about people thinking they're above the rules. Hands go up exactly when Paige nods. It smelled like rehearsal, so I stood and let the teacher voice out. Held the camera high and said, "This was hidden behind our window." VX3C30, not a fun gadget. If we're talking privacy and safety, then let's talk about who can even buy this. The room split. Some faces peeled back in shock. Others tried to keep the outrage mask on. And you could see it slip. Paige's smile tightened like a bow. Yanked too hard. She thanked everyone. Too brightly, then. On speaker called 911 and sold the dispatcher one careful word. Safety. Not crime. Not danger. Safety. The fast pass. 8 minutes and a cruiser rolls up, the first officer. Listens to Paige's neat story. Turns to Morgan for our side. Then his eyes catch up to his brain, and he steps back, Commander Reed, and in that beat, the power flips. Backup arrives, same reaction. Radio chatter spreads our address and my wife's name through the department like a summer rumor. Paige tries one last stand. Her job doesn't give her a pass, but her voice wobbles. The officers stay professional. HOA disputes are civil. If there's criminal stuff, we'll handle, that otherwise take it to the board or a court. And because this involves command staff, we have to notify a supervisor. Paige clutches her clipboard like a life raft and retreats. The next 48 hours felt like walking against a rip current. Greeting turned to silence. Shoulders turned on porches. The narrative shifted under our feet suddenly. We were the couple abusing a badge to bully an HOA. Morgan got called in for a community relations talk. Code for the brass doesn't like the smell of this. And I watched it land. She spent years doing the hard work. Folks only appreciate when they need it. Being painted as some cartoon with a rule book and an ego that stung. So I did what I know. I built a timeline, like a lesson plan. Knocked on doors with printouts, the camera photos, ordinance numbers, the 14 mailbox measurements. Benji's note about tracking issues, quotes from the meeting that didn't match what people told us in private. I didn't accuse, I laid out the math and asked questions. Some doors closed, some opened, some faces softened, and you could see the embarrassment for having stood on sand. Benji showed with a spiral notebook and guilt in his eyes. Times when Morgan left when she got home. Whether we brought work in. He thought he was helping keep an eye out. It felt wrong, but Paige asked meanwhile. A detective from Morgan's department, Neil Archer, started showing up. Where I grabbed coffee and dropping oddly specific questions, heard you had a camera issue. Curious what model consumer ones are. Nothing like the professional stuff. And that's when Morgan said, "It's soft and simple." We fish, she wired me with a little recorder and sent me to meet Archer at Clover Diner. He bought my coffee. Control move. Asked about stress and optics and whether settling would make this go away. Then he slipped and said, VX 330 like he was talking about the weather. I never told him the model we took. The recording to her captain. Internal Affairs sat him down with his own voice, and he folded in 10 minutes. Gambling debt, a number that makes your mouth go dry, and someone promised to clear it if he fed them our schedule, and some procedural inside baseball. Her name's Kara, not Paige. Kara, and that was the crack that opened the whole wall. The databases lit up, Paige. Whitmore didn't exist before 2021. But Kara Voss did a former detective out of Cleveland who disappeared the same week. 300 grand vanished from an evidence room, and a sedan turned up by Lake Erie with a good to note taped under the visor. The FBI came in. Special Agent Daniel Ruiz with the calm pen tap. And they pulled on it. Everything, utilities, HOA transfers, charity totals, shell accounts. A pattern emerged you could trace with your finger. New identity, new HOA, 12 to 16 months. Big smile, safety committees. Fines that looked official money. That bled into prepaid cards and shell LLCs and crypto that hopped like jackrabbits when agents knocked to ask Paige a few questions. Her house was empty in that staged way. Where the curtain rods are there, but the house feels wiped. Exit plan executed. Then the part I still feel in my palms, Cindy, the same neighbor who'd carried Paige's lines at the meeting, ran home to grab receipts for agents and found Kara waiting in her living room, a taser in her hand, and that same calm tone. Don't scream. You're going to help me get out. She marched Cindy to the old recreation building that had been closed all summer. Barred the doors. Hostage standoff. Ruiz kept her talking, while SWAT quietly mapped the back corridors. Kara did what she does, painted herself as the protector and Morgan as the abuser. Then Ruiz changed the music and talked asset forfeiture. Federal seizure, the part of the law that vacuums every dirty dollar. Till you're left with lint, he said, the words that break people who worship. Money, die broke. Archer started cooperating like a man clawing for air. He gave up routes, accounts the non-extradition island in the glossy brochure. Benji handed SWAT the maintenance mappy service corridor behind the old kitchen, while Kara ranted. Cindy worked the zip tie. Millimeter by millimeter. The breach was sudden and clean. Cindy rolled behind a table, like she'd practiced it in a different life. Kara put the taser down the second she saw the half-circle of rifles surrendered, like it was her plan all along. The trial months later didn't have the adrenaline of the breach, but it had something better. Receipts. Federal court in St. Louis. The prosecution lined up 4 years of numbers and faces charity totals that never hit the HOA books. Compliance fees that detoured into private accounts. Benji's notebook projected like a mirror. Cindy looked the jury in the eye and explained how easy it is to doubt yourself when someone says with perfect confidence that you're confused. Archer cried in a way that made people look at their hands. Talked about shame and small compromises that stack into ruin. And Kara. Well, her lawyers put her on the stand because her calm voice had carried her this far. It worked for a minute, then she reframed theft as resource reallocation and said neighborhoods like ours want to be managed, that we love rules until rules touch us. The jury's faces told you everything. The judge's words were careful but clear. You hurt families and broke trust and made decent people. Question their instincts, 21 years. Full restitution, no leadership or fiduciary roles in any community outfit. Ever again, Archer got 3, and probation with counseling. He lost the badge and the pension, and that hollowed him out more than any sentence. Pine Hollow Ridge didn't return to normal. We built a new one. Cindy took the HOA and made everything transparent and boring, in the best way. Every dollar explained, every decision recorded. Benji started a help crew that fixes fences and swaps out water lines and checks on Mrs. Patterson. When thunder scares her terrier, not a patrol, not a watch, just neighbors. We kept the same mailbox and put a tiny brass plaque at the base. Only, we notice when we bend to grab the mail. Trust restored, it sounds corny, until you've watched your street turn into a stage, and then a lesson. Morgan got asked to build a community liaison unit. She teaches rookies how to listen with their mouths shut and their palms open. Sometimes she sits on the edge of the bed and stares at nothing for a beat, and I hand her a glass of water, and the dog piles in. And we just breathe. Not every win feels like fireworks. Sometimes it feels like finally exhaling. There is one loose thread, encrypted files on Kara's laptop. Lists of neighborhoods. Notes too short to decode numbers that might be amounts or dates. Ruiz said they can't tell if she was a franchise of one or a gear in something bigger. Kara hinted she had bigger fish. If they cut a deal, maybe that was a bluff. Maybe it wasn't, and that's what keeps me honest when I wave at new neighbors. Peace and quiet isn't something a zip code gives you. It's something you build together, nail by nail, promise by promise, and you guard it without letting anyone weaponize the word safety to turn you against each other. You know what I mean. So tell me this, who was more dangerous in our story? The con artist with the clipboard, or the system that let one smiling neighbor turn safety into a stick for so long? Drop where you're watching from. Tell me where you think we were, right or wrong. And if you've seen selective enforcement on your street, share what it did to your trust. I'll be in the comments reading, arguing, learning.